Hello, explorers. Thanks for coming along. Welcome back to Exploring Nova, where we explore the roads, sites, and hidden gems around Northern Virginia. Before we start, I just want to take a moment to thank all of you who've been supporting the channel since the beginning. I truly appreciate every single one of you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and ring the bell so you can stay updated whenever a new video comes out. Let's get started. Today, we'll be taking a relaxing walk through the park while also diving a little into the local history that makes this place so interesting. As we keep walking, we're heading over to Battery Mount Vernon, one of the original military structures here in Fort Hunt. This battery was built around 1898 as part of a coastal defense system designed to protect Washington, D.C. from potential naval attacks along the Potomac River. Back then, this area would have looked very different, with large 8-inch guns mounted right here, ready to defend the Capitol if needed. Fort Hunt actually worked together with Fort Washington across the river, creating a defensive line to stop enemy ships from getting any closer to Washington. Interestingly, even though all this was built during a time of tension like the Spanish-American War, these guns were never fired in combat. Today, all that remains are these concrete structures. But they give you a glimpse into how important this area once was for protecting the nation's capital. As we get closer, you can start to see how this battery was laid out. Below the surface, there were hidden rooms and passageways. These were used to store ammunition, like shells and gunpowder, and to safely move them up to the guns using lifts. This whole structure is a large reinforced concrete platform, and along the top is where the 3 big gun positions used to be. These coastal defense batteries were designed this way so enemy ships out on the Potomac River wouldn't easily see them. From the water, the guns and structures would be hidden, blending right into the landscape. Let's go upstairs and see how it looks. Up here on the top level, you really start to get a better sense of how this place functioned as a defensive position. Fort Hunt was part of a larger coastal defense system built in the early 1900s, when there was real concern about protecting Washington, D.C. from attacks coming up the Potomac River. The soldiers stationed here weren't just watching the river. They were part of a coordinated defense network, working alongside other forts positioned along key nakata of the coastline. As you walk around, you can imagine this area being much more active, with crews moving equipment, monitoring the horizon, and staying ready for anything that might come upriver. Another interesting detail, some of these positions were designed with specific firing angles, meaning the guns weren't just placed randomly. They were carefully aligned to cover strategic sections of the river. These batteries were typically equipped with large coastal defense guns, some of them around 6-inch or even 8-inch caliber, which could fire shells several miles down the Potomac River. These weren't rapid-fire weapons either. Each shot had to be carefully loaded, aimed, and calculated by a trained crew. The goal wasn't volume, it was precision. One well-placed shot could disable or seriously damage an approaching ship. In addition to the larger guns, there were also smaller, faster-firing weapons nearby, designed to defend against closer targets or smaller vessels that got too near. And even though Fort Hunt never saw combat during a major attack, it still played an important role in military preparedness during both World War I and World War II. As we move away from the gun positions, there's another important part of Fort Hunt that often gets overlooked, but it played a key role in how everything operated. Because behind every artillery battery, there had to be coordination, and that's where the battery commander station comes in. This is where the command decisions were made, where officers would monitor the river, track potential targets, and coordinate the firing of the guns. It might not look as imposing as the batteries themselves, but this was essentially the brain behind the entire operation. Let's head over and take a closer look. As you look around the battery commander station, you can start to see how everything would have been laid out for efficiency. This area was designed so that the commanding officer had a clear vantage point of the river, while the rest of the team worked around him, handling calculations and communication. Typically, you would have observation points positioned toward the river. This is where they'd visually track incoming ships or targets. Then, nearby, there would be space for plotting equipment, where soldiers would calculate distance, speed, and direction based on what they were seeing. All of that information would then be relayed directly to the gun crews down at the batteries, making sure each shot was aligned with real-time data. You can almost imagine the movement, people calling out distances, tracking targets, and keeping everything in sync. The layout might seem simple now, but at the time it was very deliberate. Every position had a purpose, and everything was set up to keep information flowing quickly and accurately. So far, we've been looking at Fort Hunt as a coastal defense site, built to protect the nation's capital from threats coming up the river. But what a lot of people don't realize is that this place went on to serve a very different and much more secret role during World War II. Behind the scenes, Fort Hunt became part of a top-secret military operation. It operated under the name P.O. Box 1142, which wasn't just a name. It was actually the only address anyone was allowed to use for this place. Starting around 1942, this site was transformed into a hidden military intelligence center where high-value German prisoners were brought in for questioning. These weren't ordinary soldiers either. Many of them were U-boat commanders, scientists, and even top-level Nazi officers. What makes this place even more interesting is how the interrogations were done. Instead of using force, the U.S. relied on psychological tactics, building trust, having normal conversations, and sometimes even treating prisoners surprisingly well to get them to talk. And in many cases, it worked. At the same time, Fort Hunt wasn't just about interrogations. There was also a parallel program here that focused on helping captured American soldiers escape from enemy camps, creating hidden tools, coded messages, and survival techniques. Everything happening here was kept top secret. Even many of the people working on base didn't fully know what was going on in other sections. And after the war, most of the records were destroyed and the entire site was cleared. And for decades, almost nobody knew the role this place played. It wasn't until the early 2000s that the story of P.O. Box 1142 really started coming to light. That's when formerly classified documents began to be released, and historians started piecing together what actually happened here. At the same time, some of the veterans who had worked at P.O. Box 1142 began sharing their experiences publicly for the first time. Up until that point, Many of them had never even told their own families what they did during the war. As researchers dug deeper, they uncovered the full scope of the operation: interrogations, intelligence gathering, and even the connection to post-war programs involving German scientists. As more of this story started to come to light, it wasn't just the operation itself that stood out. It was also the people behind it. Because P.O. Box 1142 brought together a very unique group of individuals. On the American side, you had members of the U.S. Army's Military Intelligence Service and the Office of Naval Intelligence running the operation. And what's really interesting is that many of the interrogators here were German-speaking immigrants, some of them Jewish refugees who had fled Nazi Germany before the war. So in a way, they were coming face to face with the same regime they had once escaped. Then on the other side, you had the prisoners brought here, not just ordinary soldiers, but high-value individuals like U-boat commanders, intelligence officers, and even scientists connected to advanced military technology. Some of those names would later go on to play major roles after the war, including people like Werner von Braun and Reinhard Gehlen, while much of what happened here at Fort Hunt relied on intelligence and strategy. There were also moments that showed just how real and dangerous this operation could become. And one of the most intense stories connected to this place involves a German U-boat commander, Werner Henke. Henke was considered a high-value prisoner, brought here to P.O. Box 1142 because of what he knew about Germany's submarine operations. But during his time here, he made a desperate attempt to escape. In the process, he tried to climb over the fence surrounding the facility, and that's when guards opened fire. He was shot and killed right here on the grounds of Fort Hunt. It's a powerful reminder that even though this site focused on interrogation and intelligence, this was still wartime, and the stakes were incredibly high. After Werner Henke was shot during his escape attempt, the incident was quickly contained and kept under strict secrecy. Just like the rest of the operations here, very little information about what happened was shared publicly at the time. Werner Henke was not buried here at Fort Hunt. Instead, he was laid to rest at Fort George G. Meade in Maryland in a military post cemetery, alongside other German prisoners of war. His grave is still there today, marked and maintained as part of the history of World War II. Even incidents like this didn't change the overall mission. The goal remained the same: gather as much intelligence as possible from high-value prisoners without drawing attention to the site. And after the war, stories like Henke's were buried along with everything else. The buildings were removed, the personnel stayed silent, and the history of what happened here, including this incident, remained hidden for decades. After World War II came to an end, this entire site went through another major transformation. The military shut down the intelligence operations, removed most of the structures, and erased much of the physical evidence of what had taken place here. For a long time, this area faded back into the background, eventually becoming part of the parkland people walk through today. And unless you knew what to look for, you'd never realize what once stood here. And after everything this place has seen, all the secrecy, the history, and the stories that stayed hidden for decades, Fort Hunt today feels like a completely different world. What used to be a military installation and a top-secret intelligence site is now a peaceful public park. You'll find people out here having picnics, walking their dogs, spending time with family, just enjoying the open space. And that's probably what makes this place so unique. Because underneath all of that, there's a history that most people wouldn't even realize is here. So whether you come for the history or just to relax and enjoy the outdoors, Fort Hunt is a place that brings both together. Thanks for coming along with me today. This is Exploring Nova, and I'll catch you in the next one.